but he had to slip on 2 items, like I have here. But of course, I am able to corroborate that fact, that people did sleep on these things, because before I was brought to Robben Island, I was a prisoner on the mainland, a detainee, that's what they call me, was on trial, and they made us sleep on things like I have here. Explains why, at some stage, bloody cold winter, I slept on about 12 of these things. Just trying to get on the ground, that's to speak. And of course, other people who have come back to visit as former prisoners tell me on the island initially this was it. Now there is one such person who has come back, a former prisoner who has come back to visit no less than 20 times, is unable to continue his visits here too because of ill health. Nelson Mandela has confirmed that they slept on this initially. The fiber here, I'm told, is rocked from some cactus-like plant. Cactus-like, the likes of which I think Mexicans use for brewing tequila from. And thus they added later. The arrangement, they say, was something to the following effect. First one you put there, and then this, which was a little much more comfortable, comparatively speaking, is what you somewhat rolled up, because they weren't afforded pillows. That was the arrangement. 3 or 4 grey blankets. Now this was until about 1977, 78, which explains why the story is they could put up to 120 souls in here. On both sides they slept. Now unlike today, comparatively a very beautiful day, in the winter it becomes bloody cold. Somewhat wet floors we have here. And of course we had factors like hard labor, scant medical facilities, hardened criminals to deal with, and worst of all, guards with a very serious attitude problem. Now these were some of the guards who were quite brutal in their ways. Because for one of the others, I suppose because of the ideology of the time, all the prisoners here were kept black, male, and all the guards white, male, South African. And this engendered a lot of racial conflict, because there was very poor rapport between the guards, or should I say black and white people, generally speaking. And in this jail it just became worse, because you were a political prisoner, the guard was white, and you didn't see eye to eye, just about with regards to everything. And of course they had the upper hand. And that is why stories abound of how people were actually beaten up over the years by some of these guards. Just kicked you in the butt for the sake of it. Because
Were you beaten?
Well, that was taken care of by the security police on the mainland.
Right.
That was the term. People who we called the South African Gestapo. They did quite a good job. Because if you escaped through that net, you were lucky. Many people never made it through the hands of the security police. They died in the torture chambers. But in this jail, none of the guards ever beat me up. Because from late 1977, early 1978, we had people visiting, friends from Switzerland, members of the Red Cross Committee International. And they were the only international watchdog organization allowed right onto the island, in the building. A parliamentarian called Helen Suzman invited them. She was this lady in the opposition. That was the only woman in parliament, because the country, unfortunately, was in the hands of machismo, patriarchy, men believing by virtue of testosterone that they were the superior species. They ruled those. Then, folks, interestingly, every prisoner in this jailhouse was given something like this. In all jails, for that matter. They call it in Afrikaans a prisoner identiteitsdocument, a prisoner identity document. That's it. which had your name on it. It says dat die nam die misdaadsabotasie die vonnis 20 jaar gevangenisstraf. De datum van vonnis is in the year 1964, a poor man called Benaya was given 20 years as a prison sentence for the alleged crime sabotage. Until 1984, they kept him in jail. Now, he was regarded as a political prisoner. A dangerous one for that matter, he said. And that is why they had no business considering remission, parole, or a reduction sentence. Except, which was kind of ironic, it was not one of those many paradoxes. People with crimes like murder, crack and rape, if given 20 years, only served half the sentence. If you murdered somebody, raped somebody, like all these heinous crimes against individuals, they will actually pardon you if they believe that whilst you're in jail, you were well behaved. But in the case of political prisoners, there was no compromise. It was a matter of ideology. What I think, what I believe, what I perceive to be right might not be what you think so. And so there was no compromise. And that is why, in the case, for instance, of the death sentence, they simply hanged you until you died. And in the case of those with a life sentence, they would have only have to send the body back, the corpse, after you died. Because with a life sentence, a date of discharge, geen datum van ontslag. There was no date of discharge. It simply means that those who are serving life sentences would be in jail today if the apartheid system had not collapsed. Thanks to the efforts not just of South Africans, but of millions of people across the world who actually contributed to the economic collapse of that evil system. My dear people, that's the one story about it. Oh no, it is not the end of the story. Eugene. Folks, there is a little thingy there at the top. This here number is basically what became this man's identity. Because my belief is that the apartheid ideology, such ideologies, such governments, would have had amongst their broader aims the eradication of people's identities, culturally or otherwise. In jail, they reduced you to a number, typical of such regimes. This man for 20 years was just that little thing. The 69th prisoner in the year 1964. And of course, that's where the number 4664 comes from. Nelson Mandela's prison identity, it derives from the fact that he was the 466th prisoner in the year 1964. His HIV/AIDS awareness campaign number. And everybody, of course, had a little number attaching to his identity. Now, they divided prisoners here into 4 groups, A, B, C, D. Whatever they believed defined you as a well-behaved prisoner. They put you in this category. But on arrival, initially, that's where you are. Yeah. So if they think you are not too bad, okay, move him up. Instead of 1 letter, 1 visit, you had 2 letters, 2 visits a month. Then it became 3 or 4. Then when that's up to 7, 8 letters, plus a radio, a TV. And you could have, in the 80s, a newspaper, and what else? Some stupid movie on Saturday. Always violent movies. And too much, of course. And that was the arrangement. And of course, this particular system engendered a lot of political conflict between the ANC, the PAC, the Communist Party, and the Blackers. Because we who prefer to stay here argued that on the mainland, white is number 1, colored Asian number 2 and 3, black number 4. Same principle. Why not fight for the eradication of the system? Everybody must be treated the same. Well, they said no. But this was the old principle of trying to somewhat control people mentally. Because when once they gave you things here, they expected you to agree to their dictates. Whereas whilst you insisted on keeping here, You didn't have to obey their rules or their laws, particularly such rules and laws that you believed were an affront to your dignity, which were many, of course. The fact that you as a prisoner had to call the guards master, no, that's out of the question, way out of the question. That we didn't allow. That you had to somehow genuflect and behave in a very lame way psychologically in their presence. We said we won't take that, we'd rather stay here and have nothing except our dignity intact. My dear people, that's the story about the ID. Oh, as some people say, the story is not over until the fat lady sings. Folks, I'm saying this because it's a very interesting one. A lady from England, Lancashire, inquired as to why they made us carry such big ones in jail. This is just a blown up version. My dear people, last story, but kind of, I think, very interesting to know the fact that we in jail were classified as the Coloureds and the Asian. Now, these were real things in the mainland, and others were called the Bantu. Now, in here, people who basically would be referred to as Negroid. People from the Orient, mainly from Indonesia, India, and such countries were brought here by, amongst others, the Dutch, as part of indentured labor and the British. And here, that's a long and complicated story, which of course excludes white South Africa. Incidentally, I don't remember me saying so. White political prisoners were not kept here, but on the mainland in a place called Pretoria Central. Never brought here because they weren't allowed, so to speak, to mix with the infidel, even in jail. Now, these guys were somewhat privileged, for they had bread to eat at lunch and supper with jam and syrup. For the blacks, it says no jam, no syrup, and no bread. One of the privileges is the coloration. Or, for instance, they would serve you 2 ounces of sugar here, and here they gave you less, 1/2 an ounce less. 6 ounces of meat, which they served 3 times a week, as opposed to 1 ounce less. 1 ounce of fat as opposed to 1/2 an ounce. And of course, coffee or tea, coffee was breakfast and supper for these are 1/8 of an ounce. Coffee for breakfast for those guys, 1/5 of an ounce. And of course, there are men who tell me in the 1960s, 64, Billy, blah, blah, blah. In this category, in terms of prison uniform, short pant trousers strictly throughout the year. And a pair of sandals when footwear was introduced. Whereas in here, you qualified because of your perceived superiority to these people. You qualified for shoes, socks, underwear, and long pant trousers in the cold. And that was the story. Whether you liked it or not, that's how they did things. And of course, we always suspected that white prisoners must be having a little better on the mainland. And we have had some of these gentlemen come here as free citizens and have vindicated our suspicions. That basically gives you a microcosm of what South Africa looked like. Folks, are there any questions? Well, that thing there. Folks, there's a substance, it's a food substance they call the puza amana. It's maize also, but that's the Zulu word, because apparently the thing was kind of brewed to give you strength. One Australian guy, because he was explaining the meaning of the word, it says that puza, to drink in Zulu, puza ndoni, that's what the Zulu people say. Puza, and the word amana there means strength. Apparently it was brewed to give you strength, a cup of which they served you at lunch. No wonder one Australian guy misunderstood me to think that I was talking about things like glucosamine or things like that. Now, just maize it was, because the belief was that for some stupid reason, blacks had to eat maize all the way 3 times a day, 365 days of the year. And it was an actual belief, you know. It's interesting that after years of being in jail, You ultimately have got to make friends with the gods. I mean, what else can you do? Being in the same place, 20 years with the same people, you ultimately just have got to talk to one another. And amongst other conversations, we ask the gods, tell us guys, why do you think that we, black people, should be fed so much maize every day? And we said, well, guys, we actually take it that it's a favor that we're bestowing upon you because we have got this impression that you black people just love maize. As if they were saying we have a natural passion for the stuff. And I mean, there was no point in arguing with these guys. Beliefs are just what they are, whatever informs them. Because the interesting thing about maize, or what some people call corn, is that apparently corn is not indigenous to the continent. It is something that's brought in from somewhere else. If that be the case, the argument must stand that there cannot be any genetic or DNA or evolutionary connection between maize and black. But God knows black people do eat a lot of maize in this country. In fact, just across sub-Sahara, maize is the thing. So the question is why? If it's not a genetic thing, if it's not an evolutionary. It is because I suppose the foodstuff is kind of very cheap to cultivate, to come by, even to buy in this country. It's the kind of thing that you literally can plant anywhere. Don't have to be a farmer, industrialized or well educated. It's the kind of thing that you can actually plant in the backyard, which a lot of black people do. And it's basic survival, nothing else. The result of years of systematic dispossession leads to the poorest of the poor having to eat that which is cheaply available. Same thing here. My dear sir, what might be your time? 5 past or 10 past? No?
5 past.
Thank you. Folks, are there any questions before we leave this room?
Could I ask you a personal one?
Ma'am.
Are you part San?
Am I?
Part San.
Actually, I don't know, but a man came along the other day who speaks my language, and he's one of these proud guys who doesn't speak Xhosa. I mean, we had to learn to speak Xhosa, that's the Mandela language. Yeah, because they're in the majority. Oh, but we found the question, why do you ask?
Well, because some of your features, you're not small enough, but some of your features are similar.
Oh, my grandma was small enough, my grandma was small. So is my brother, but very, very arrogant people. Always looking for a fight. My brother is. I don't know, I'll come to you. So the point is that I am told, yes, if you move up north past the Kruger National Park, just before you get into Botswana, on the side of Mozambique, but on the side of Botswana, that's where you find some of the same people who somewhat are connected by blood to the group of Tswana people who call themselves a royalty within Botswana. They are called Babolo, but those are the ones where I come from, who think that they are the best people in the world. You could say so.
Were political prisoners kept in this room?
Yes, I was kept in one of these with political prison for 5 years.
Right.
Then later I was allocated a single cell. But you had political prisoners like the Mandelas who were never kept in rooms this big, strictly single cells. I said,
What political crime were you in prison for?
I was accused, so he said on my charge sheet, terrorism. Terrorism. Oh, but then the interesting thing about terrorism, as defined then, which I only learned about 2 years ago, just reading some of the history, is that the definition of terrorism in South Africa in the past didn't have a full stop. So it could be anything the prosecutor wanted it to be, or the main. It could be a deed, or what you failed to do, what you said, or what you didn't say. Carrying a book, a slogan, saying Viva Mandela, that was terrorism. Or even blowing up a pole or whatever else. In my case, it was because of, sorry folks, in my case, it was because of what they call Bantu education. because there was a curriculum, a special design for black children, another one for Asian and Cubs, and an exclusive one for white South Africans. Because the belief was that, whether you liked it or not, God had engineered you such that you in this category can only become a gardener, or what basically English would call ewers of hood and drawers of water, finish and clap. And that was the education system. So when we took to the street, they called in the security forces because that was a belief. The belief generally that permeated the mentality of the time was that black people were kind of satisfied with their lot. This was God's way of doing things. So don't interfere with the system. Which is why then there's one thing that they taught us, little children, that whatever difficulties you come across, pain, suffering, hunger, God, just remember, it is your cross to bear, and do that with dignity, because somewhere down the line in heaven they told me you'll be paid back 100-fold. Just understand that. Even if somebody kicks you in the butt, it's just fine. But of course, as young people, we had a lot of oomph and vuma, and we challenged the system. And met up with security forces. 3 days of a very fierce street battle, which was my 10th street battle anyway. But this time they got hold of me, and after being locked away in solitary for 3 months and tortured, I relented. And they had me write a confession statement to the fact that I was chairperson who had helped instigate this protest march. They afforded us a trial. Yes, the Bugs did that. 3 years on trial, convicted, which was expected, and at the end of which they passed a 15-year prison sentence. So that's basically the long and short of the story. Folks, will you come in this way? Just a minute.